Hey everyone, welcome to the Generation Y Conservative. This is the third podcast. As an introduction to me, you can find me on Facebook and Twitter which is on Twitter at Gen Y Conservative without the E. You can also find me on my Facebook page, which I'm streaming live on right now during my podcast, which you can find on Friday nights. Typically it's at 9 o'clock that I try to go live, but tonight was a little bit later, but you always get notifications if and when I'm going live, so you can always check that out. So as people start tuning in and everything, I encourage people to start getting involved and making comments and asking questions as I go over topics. I was actually quite surprised this week as I was going back through all the things that I posted from this week in regards to political topics and everything, at actually how much stuff has happened since the last podcast. Surprisingly, the day after the podcast happened, what actually ended up happening, the big news of last week, was that Fidel Castro of Cuba died. And I think one of my favorite memes that was floating around, now I'm not one to joke about death or anything, but in this case, the meme that was floating around was in regards to Fidel Castro, who fought all his life against capitalism, dies on Black Friday, which I think was probably the best meme that was actually floating around. So he's gone. A lot of people in Cuba are celebrating that. People in Florida that were Cuban refugees are certainly celebrating that. And, there's a reason why people risk their lives and their families' lives to escape from there on rafts to come to America and enjoy the freedoms that we have here. It is what it is with his death, I guess. In other news too, speaking of refugees, actually, one of the things that happened this week was there was an 18-year-old Somali refugee who drove through a campus, hitting people with his car, and then went on an attack. Now, at first, when people started tuning into the news, what was happening was they were saying that this was a gun attack, and immediately, within a matter of minutes, people started freaking out about gun violence, going on gun control rants, and jumping to conclusions, as they always do with any of this type of news, and making sure that their agenda was heard by using this as an example. But what ended up happening was this was actually an attack by this refugee, and he was using a knife and going on an attack. Now, besides the media and liberals jumping to conclusions on this being a gun incident, including the VP that ran in this last election under Hillary, Tim Kaine, who immediately jumped to the conclusion that this was a gun, what actually ended up happening was this turned out to be a bad guy that was brought down by a good guy with a gun. Now, you're going to find these types of incidents happening all over the United States, but they're rarely talked about. In this case, because the media jumped to the conclusion so quickly that this was an attack of a gun-wielding maniac, they unfortunately had to follow up that news with the fact that it was a knife attack. But there's, certainly cases all over the country where people have tried robbing convenience stores or banks or anything else, walked into coffee shops, and they start wielding a gun around and threatening people. And what ends up happening is someone that's there that has a concealed carry ends up taking out the person and, being the hero. So it's always interesting that those news stories are rarely reported, because it doesn't fit the agenda of the left and the media in this country. And to that matter as well, they also leave out things like Chicago, where the highest gun rate of crimes are, because that city is technically a city where guns are banned, yet they're still used, and they are among the highest in the country of the rates of violence, as well as Baltimore, which is, I think, another city that is supposed to ban them. So let's go a little bit against the grain here as far as topics where I have to call out my own side on some of their hypocrisy. This week, Trump set out a tweet where he said that those who burn the American flag should face penalties. Now, I made my thoughts very clear on my page. What he actually said in the tweet was, "Nobody should be allowed to burn the American flag. If they do, there must be consequences, perhaps loss of citizenship or a year in jail." The problem with this is that it is not constitutional. There is a freedom of speech in this country and a freedom of expression, freedom of gathering and protesting peacefully, which is taken way out of line now with people. But what we have here is people exercising their constitutional right to do so by burning what boils down to being is an American symbol. Now, do I think that this is the right way of going about things and showing that you're upset with the way things are going in this country? Absolutely not. But, you know, the American flag, what it comes down to is that it's a symbol for this country. So it's disgusting that people would burn the American flag and use that as a means of protesting. But at the same time, the argument out there is that there's two arguments actually in regards to those that fight for this country and the freedom of speech under the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. The same argument can actually be used on both sides. So what we actually have is people saying that the soldiers that have fought for this country deserve a lot more respect because they fought for that flag and the freedoms that it represents. But at the same time, that argument can be used by the left saying that those soldiers fought for the Constitution and this country and that freedom to protest as you see fit. So in this case, I would actually lean towards that argument a little bit more. You are free to express yourself to be a complete idiot and disgusting moron that would burn the American flag. Do I agree with the way that you're protesting in this country? Absolutely not. But let's just realize and take a step back instead of acting out of anger towards these people that in fact they are idiots that are doing this and that the flag is just a symbol. Now, it's a symbol that those of us on the right can certainly look up to and hold as a more valuable symbol than the left does. But in the end, it is in fact something that's covered under the Constitution. So I believe that he's wrong. Now, one of the other arguments that was had during this time when this made big news was the fact that I had a friend, and I won't mention who, but he was arguing that the left has been getting away for too long with making unconstitutional things into laws or policies, and that they've gotten away with it for too long, so it's our time to fight back now and start putting into place policies that we feel are the right policies in response to that. But my response to that is, where does it stop? You know, if we're acting out of vengeance with policies towards these people on the left, and we get this done, then what happens when the opposing party to you and your thoughts assumes power in these offices? What ends up happening is then they want vengeance based on what you put out as a policy, and then it just is a cyclical matter. It just keeps on going and going. So I don't think that's a good argument, because where does it stop? You know, power shifts left and right, and that's what we've talked about over and over again with the pendulum effect. The reason why we got Obama into office, besides some reasons by the left to make history and stuff, which they also used for Hillary, but the main reason was that the left was angry, and for rightly so in some cases, so was the right, on what Bush was doing in this country and what he stood for. And out of that response came Obama. Well, the pendulum swung the other way because of all of Obama's policies, like Common Core coming in under his rule, Obamacare, all these drastic measures and pressures on the military and everything, that the pendulum swung back the other way in response to him. And everybody on the left, including people in the media, were shocked at the fact that Donald Trump, of all people, had this ability to skyrocket into a powerful position because they just weren't reading the signs of where this country was going and the grievances of this country. Instead of instead of trying to take a middle role and appease everyone and try to reason things out and have a conversation and open debate in this country, what we've chosen to instead act on is swinging in radical directions, trying to appease the radicals on each side of those groups. So, let's stay on Twitter, actually. So not only did Trump tweet out this in regards to the American flag, but there was also another interesting thing that came across my news feed in regards to Twitter as well, and that is that Twitter, if you're not familiar, if you go on, you'll actually find little symbols next to people's Twitter handles that shows that those people are verified, and that means that they are, they're verified. Essentially, that is the real person. If it's a celebrity, you can make sure that that's the celebrity instead of an impersonator or anything. So Twitter has come out and verified an account of the Muslim Brotherhood and has allowed them to stream their vile hatred and terroristic rhetoric. Okay, all this within the same year that the service itself, Twitter, actually shut down Milo Yiannopoulos as his account because of the kind of stuff that he was actually talking about, and standing up against the left and throwing out bombs, which he says he's a bomb thrower, a bomb dropper, but he is a infamous antagonist on the right who is an ardent Trump supporter and an outspoken gay conservative that often criticizes our PC culture and liberal safe spaces. So wrap your head around that. So we actually have this guy who may offend you in little remarks that he makes, getting shut down as opposed to Twitter verifying the account of a known terrorist group. So how do you weigh those two things? In my mind, Twitter has come out and in a war against conservative voices on their platform, and yet have allowed these accounts like the Muslim Brotherhood to have these accounts and spew this hateful rhetoric, and allowed it as to use that platform as an actual means of recruiting people to their groups. I see I have a viewer there, so if you want to comment, you can get involved in the discussion there too. So I thought that was interesting. So, excuse me. So here's something else that happened, and we can actually stay on the going back to Trump for a second here. In news that is related to Trump, Nancy Pelosi was actually reelected as the House Minority Leader. Now, I find this really interesting because Nancy Pelosi is what I would refer to as a fossil politician. She's been there forever, and she would actually find that remark highly inappropriate and actually hate it. She's even made comments where a reporter asked her at one point in time why we don't do away with the Washington elitist politicians that have been there for so long and refresh it with new blood. And she actually took great offense to that, saying that just because she's old doesn't mean she can't have new ideas, and because it must be that she's a woman. But Nancy Pelosi has been reelected as House Minority Leader, which tells me one thing. If you're actually taking a look at this election and the results from it, one thing should be taken away by the left, and that is that the tactics and policies that they have been pushing were the reason and direct response to why this election ended up the way that it did. The fact that we had such a swing in everything. Now, you can look at the popular vote if you'd like, but the fact of the matter is the Republicans have assumed control of the presidency, the House, the Senate, and pretty soon the Supreme Court as well. So that kind of response to the liberal policies and behavior of the leftist culture in this country is what caused this direct response with the voting and the election. So what would you take from this if you were a Democrat in D.C. right now? If you were smart, you would look at this as an opportunity to take a step back for a month or two and meet with leadership and start talking about how we need to reconfigure what our policies are, what we stand for, and actually go about this at a different means and start tackling these issues from a different perspective, because obviously what we've been doing has had backlash and is a bad response to what happened in this election. Instead, what they did was they put the same old tired politicians in power or in leadership roles that will just keep them going down this road. And to their own detriment as well. I mean, what we're going to see is the Democrat Party and the Republican Party really start to crumble because of the push for these outsider influences in D.C. to actually flush out Washington or drain the swamp, as Trump supporters would say. Let's go with the celebrity political news. I found this really interesting, actually. Mark Walhberg came out and said that celebrities need to shut up about politics, which is something I've been saying for very long. Now, Walhberg would open himself up to criticism here if he actually dove into political issues within this article. He briefly mentioned something, but in this case, what he said was, it just goes to show you that people aren't listening to that anyway. They might buy your CD or watch your movie, but you don't put food on their table. You don't pay their bills. A lot of Hollywood is living in a bubble. They're pretty out of touch with the common person, the everyday guy out there providing for their family. Me, I'm very aware of the real world. I come from the real world, and I exist in the real world. And although I can navigate Hollywood, and I love the business and the opportunities it's afforded me, I also understand what it's like not to have all that. So, here's what I've said over time, is that what I'm really sick of with these celebrities like Leonardo DiCaprio and Susan Sarandon and Rosie O'Donnell, Whoopi Goldberg, but in her case, she's on The View, so I guess that's her platform to talk about political issues, is that, or how about Jennifer Lawrence is one that is one of the highest paid celebrities, female actresses in Hollywood, and yet spews just some of the most ridiculous things sometimes politically. But what they're actually doing is they're actually taking their spotlight and using it to try and sway the everyday person in this country to vote a certain way or to act a certain way by using what they do, which is pretend to be someone like a politician and then act like a politician in real life. One of the biggest problems that we have in this country right now, and we'll actually touch upon this a little bit later, is that most millennials get their news from sources like The Daily Show. And the fact that celebrities like that, or comedians in that case, are giving the news to people and having this sway over the opinion of the public, and then that public goes out and votes, is pretty scary, because these are susceptible people that obviously don't have in a lot of cases, the mindset to go out and do their own research and instead listen to a comedy skit and take it as real news. In this case, you're talking about celebrities that these kids look up to, and taking their word as gospel on climate change and, other political issues like poverty and everything. Now, here I start talking about global warming, and I'm told to shut up because I'm not a scientist. But in the case of someone like Leonardo DiCaprio, he's perfectly allowed to go ahead and start talking about climate change because he's played a scientist or something like that in a movie. And that's the way it goes with all these celebrities. They use their spotlight to get up on a soapbox where they have more power to reach more people by using their soapbox to get out there. So in this case, Mark Walhberg, I think, has a great point. Celebrities should stay out of politics unless they're actually running for a political office, like, unfortunately, Jesse Ventura or Arnold Schwarzenegger. Bad examples, unfortunately. Let's go to a little bit more local news in this case. I'm here in Pennsylvania right now, and right adjacent to us, New Jersey has passed a new law that allows hiring of retired police officers as security for their districts. Now, I find this actually fascinating, especially for it to happen in a liberal state like New Jersey, but this is an awesome direction for them to go. I think it's a great direction for them to go. When I was on the board of directors for our school district here, it was a topic that came up. It wasn't something that we actually ended up voting on at any point in time, but I think that this is a great idea. I think it gives the opportunity for people that have the extensive necessary training to protect the lives of the most valuable treasure to people, and that is their children. The fact that they are now allowed to be in schools and protect the schools when we've had little to do that besides locking the doors and putting everything on lockdown, I'm all for it. I commend New Jersey for doing that, and I hope more states start to follow suit because I think it's a great idea. So, I see people start tuning in and out and everything. So here's a question that I posed on Facebook earlier this week. And get involved on there and start commenting because I can actually see what you're saying there. Here's the question for you. Now that the Republicans will be in control of the Senate, House, presidency, and potentially the Supreme Court, maybe it's time to do a couple things to tackle this national debt by cutting funding or reallocating it for certain policies and places. You can get involved and tell me what you think we should cut in funding or reallocate and what to. But here's some of the things I came up with. Number one, Obamacare. I'm all for it. It's a disaster. President Obama today actually got on Facebook Live to do a video and encourage the public to come out in favor and support of his Obamacare policy because it's done wonders for the public in regards to healthcare. What he fails to understand is it was a waste of breath because the reason why Trump got into office is because of things like Obamacare. So obviously a good portion, if not majority of this country, and I know people on the left as well that can actually see this as a problem, have reacted in the election by voting against his policy and putting Trump into office, or voting for Jill Stein or voting for Gary Johnson or any of the number of other candidates that were running. This was because Hillary Clinton was going to be more of the same. And she's a wicked person anyway, too. So besides Obamacare, one of my ideas, too, was Planned Parenthood. Not that we cut that funding, but reallocate that funding to women's clinics across the United States that don't provide abortions. In this case, if you actually look at the map of where women's clinics are that don't provide abortions, you'll actually find that around the United States there's about 9,000 clinics. Now, that's a statistic that the left won't bring up when they're arguing for Planned Parenthood because they don't want you to know that. They don't want you to know that the funding that's going to Planned Parenthood, it goes to these clinics where they actually provide abortions, and in a lot of cases is the majority reason why people go to Planned Parenthood. But their argument is you can't prove that it's going to abortion. So, as I said before, let's reallocate it to women's clinics where they don't provide abortions. Because if the main concern is the health of women across the country, we can tackle that issue by giving it to clinics that also do everything else besides abortions. I think it's morally wrong and unacceptable for us to be putting money towards clinics that also use that towards abortions. You know, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, what we end up doing is allocating people's monies who are adamantly against that, who people like me whose faith goes against that, and taking your money and putting it towards the ending of a life. I would be perfectly fine with this money going towards women's health issues, you know, breast cancer exams, anything else that involves women's health that you can't get done at a regular doctor. I'm all for that. Reallocate the funds. How about NPR, National Public Radio? This has been an issue for me for quite a while that just drives me absolutely insane because this is government-funded radio, and they do get some charity work done and donations to NPR as well. I actually know someone that is a person that goes around looking for funding for NPR, but for the most part, this is a propped-up radio station by the government that uses our tax dollars to do this radio show 24 hours a day. Where if you compare it to, first of all, number one, it's liberal news on the radio, okay? There's no getting around that. The opinions vary very, very seldom, okay? If you compare those to the conservative radio stations out there, like on iHeartRadio or anything, the only way that those conservative radio stations can actually be in existence is if they get the advertising dollars by going out and seeking businesses to advertise on their radio station and prop up that radio station. That's how people like Glenn Beck, Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, Mark Levin, Mark Stein, and all of them make their money, is they make it through advertising. But in the case of NPR, what we have is government funds, our tax dollars, going to prop up these radio stations. So, again, let's cut funding to NPR and reallocate that to somewhere else. In this case, if NPR wants to be in existence at this point, what they need to do is compete with the conservative radio stations out there and actually seek out advertising funding. And that shouldn't be too hard, because there's a lot of businesses that would be perfectly fine advertising during radio segments that don't deal with politics. In the case of conservative radio, that's all it is. So it is actually a lot tougher to find advertisers than I would know, because I actually searched for a time while I was searching for my own radio station. So we have people tuned in here. Again, the question I posed is, now that the Republicans are assuming control of the Senate, House, presidency, and the Supreme Court, maybe it's time we tackle the national debt by cutting funding or reallocating it to certain policies or places. I listed off Obamacare, Planned Parenthood, NPR, and there's some other things out there. What I'm interested in is you actually commenting on the video here and letting me know what else you think that we should stop funding to or reallocate those services to, because I can see what you're saying there, and I'd be happy to share it and also react to it as well. While we're doing that, while we're waiting for some of those responses, the state of Kansas is trying to make a lesbian couple's sperm donor pay for child support. So let that sink in for a little bit while I take a drink for you. So the state of Kansas is trying to make the sperm donor pay for child support. And it's the state of Kansas that's doing this. You know, first of all, the couple obviously had to go to the state of Kansas to request that this be done. But the state of Kansas is actually backing this couple. So what the heck is going on? This makes absolutely no sense. It's one of those articles that you just sit back and you think, how the heck did we come to this time in our nation where this is the kind of thing that is happening, that's being allowed, that the state governments would get behind them on this? It boggles my mind. Yeah, we're actually kind of keeping with the birth and Planned Parenthood issues here, because I was talking about funding there for a second, and then this lesbian couple's a sperm donor for the child support. So Buzzfeed actually posted an article this week entitled, "These Women Funded Their Abortions with Facebook Donations." So in this case, if you actually go to their article where they posted this, they used the worst case scenarios as examples to promote this idea that people should start funding abortions for other people that can't afford it by using these worst case scenarios. So in this case, and it actually got me thinking. First of all, let me just say that the BuzzFeed article got me thinking, and was interesting in some ways. What the portion of it that got me thinking a lot is they were talking about homeless women that were raped because of the circumstances that they were in, and that they got an abortion because of those types of circumstances. And my heart really does go out to that. I don't think I've ever thought of that circumstance with homeless people or people in dire need of shelter or anything, that are out in the cold in bad circumstances where they're actually just taken advantage of by people out there and are, stepped over in public. But the other cases were things like rape, women that were raped and looking for, an abortion to be funded by Facebook donations and everything. And this is nothing new. What has happened in the past, this one was specifically about Facebook donations, but what has happened in the past is, GoFundMe's actually set up for people to get donations for their abortions as well. Now, this is glorifying the fact that people would actually want to donate toward this. You can make the argument to me on the fact that you have these reasons why you would want an abortion. I would argue against those reasons. But the fact of the matter is, I don't understand how people could willingly just throw money towards an abortion that isn't even their own and ending that life. I mean, that seems really sick to me. But to go off of that, for those of you that don't know, let me just go over a personal story of mine as quick as possible because it is a long story. It's a recap of my family history. So my grandfather is a product of rape. And what actually ended up happening as quickly as possible is his aunt at the time adopted him and raised him as her own. And he grew up thinking that his aunt was his mom and his mom was his aunt. And because of that, we have over 20 people in our family tree that have descended from his existence that wouldn't be alive today if that family had decided on going with an abortion. So when people come to me and start arguing with me on the fact that rape, nothing good can come of rape, and that nothing good can come of a baby that is a product of rape, and that they shouldn't be in existence, and that you need to eliminate that problem, your argument's not going to work for me, because I am an example of a descendant of that type of situation, and it's absolutely false. I mean, you may not like me and my political views, and if you're that sick that you're going to hate me and say that the abortion should have happened because I wouldn't have my political views, then look in the eyes of my kids, who are 3 beautiful daughters that I have that have nothing to do with politics. They wouldn't be in existence either. So let's get to the big topic this week. I posted this article on my Facebook page as well as my personal page, and both have been blowing up, more so with reaction from my side, and just tonight I've been starting to get reaction from the left as well. So Tomi Lahren, who is a fire starter in a good way, I think, on the Blaze Network, was on the Daily Show with Trevor Noah this week and did an interview. Now here's what's interesting. The interview, which you may have seen, actually took place over the course of 26 minutes. But they only aired 6 minutes of that interview. And that 6 minutes was really designated to the fact that Trevor Noah launched into a scripted attack where he essentially said, conservatives are racist. So let's go with that premise first. You are a conservative, Tommy, and therefore, by that deduction, you are a racist. So, if that's the way that you're going to start off a conversation, then there's nowhere for her to go. She was pigeonholed into that discussion as a racist, and that it wasn't going to be, getting out of it, because he designated her as a racist by saying those types of things that pigeonholed her there, and all she could do is be on the offensive from that point forward, or the defensive actually, and had to attack or claw her way out of it. Now, a lot of the interview they didn't share. What they did share was the things that tripped her up. For instance, some of the biggest videos that have been going viral for her lately have been her attacks on Colin Kaepernick of the San Francisco 49ers, the quarterback on their team, who has been taking a knee during the national anthem as a sign of protest for the oppression of Black Americans. She has taken great issue with that. Again, this is like the flag burning I talked about in the beginning. If we take a step back for a second and you really look at what's going on, is it really that big of a deal? He of course has better avenues of going about it. I think he's being a baby on the field when he does it, but he is taking an opportunity to protest in his own way, and that's his own thing. If he wants to do it, is it hurting anybody? That's my first concern. Is this hurting somebody? Tommy would argue that this is hurting or being a sign of bad feelings that our military would get, and that it would offend them and the things that they fought for, kind of like the flag burning that we talked about in the beginning of this video. I would say our soldiers are tough enough to call him a spade and label him as an idiot and just say, it is what it is. Colin Kaepernick didn't even vote in this election, okay? So I think it was Stephen A. Smith that just annihilated him in the best possible way, that if you don't stand up and vote, then what the hell are you protesting out there? Okay? You got to get out and vote for the issues that you feel represent you the best, first and foremost. And if you're going to complain and whine about these things at least back it up with some action. And the most simple action you could take is by getting out and voting for the causes that you believe in. So in this case, what happened with Trevor Noah on The Daily Show is that he was cornering Tomi Lahren and saying, how should he have protested? Unfortunately for Tomi, I think she went with talking points that she has been going over and over and over in her head and on her show and everything, and revisiting those without actually answering the question. And it unfortunately didn't come off that well on camera. Now, what they didn't show is later in the interview that didn't air, there were places where she actually got Trevor Noah tripped up. So in the end, Trevor Noah and Tomi Lahren actually, after the show, defended each other and said, this is not a bad person. We had an open discussion, and our fans on each side are attacking for no reason, and you should just, calm down a little bit. But at the same time, I would argue against that, because I think that these scripted attacks, first of all, let me go over this real quick. Back when Jon Stewart was the host of The Daily Show, he went through a time period where there was a writer's strike for all these television shows and everything. And during that writer's strike, that show actually shut down because, maybe he could argue that it was out of respect or something like that to the writers, that they didn't want to go on with a show without the writers' material showing up in because they owed so much to them. But I would actually argue that people like Jon Stewart can't do things that well off script. He did come out post this election and say some things about Trump that I thought were pretty classy, actually, in complete the opposite direction of where I thought he was going to go when he was asked to respond to the election results. But I don't think that Jon Stewart could put a whole show together. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, where you have Tomi Lahren, she writes all of her own material and has gone over this in another interview that I actually watched recently, because she wants to have control over what she's saying and how she says it. She wants to have the words come out of her mouth as her own words, her own style of saying things. Now, am I a Tomi Lahren fan? Am I sitting here defending Tomi Lahren just because she happens to be more towards my side of the issues? No, I think that Tomi has done exactly what Trump did in the election, but on the media side. I think that Tomi has tapped into a pipeline of emotion out there in the United States of people that are really upset with the direction that this country has been going, and using that as a means to feed on it and use it as material. So in this case here, she comes off very angry in her final thought segments. But let's look at the landscape and reality of Tomi Lahren as a person too. She has a sense of humor. I've seen her off camera doing funny things and having a sense of humor. What it actually comes down to is she's pretty green to the industry, and I'm not using that as an excuse. But when you jump in popularity like she did from One American News Network to where she is now at the Blaze because of a couple viral videos that just boosted and skyrocketed her popularity, because of these viral videos where she actually used and tapped into her own anger on what was going on with Obama, that it just shot up these videos in the viral cause. You set a precedent. You set an example of, okay, I need to continue doing this kind of stuff because this is what has caught the attention of America. So being new to the industry, I think she's going to level off and start finding different ways of approaching things, maybe throwing in some humor, smiling every now and then, I think would be great for her. But another issue with her too is she is extremely intelligent. The fact that she writes all of her own material and knows what she's talking about, whether you agree with it or not, she can tackle those issues when she's on camera based on her own thoughts. So, the other obvious thing is she's popular because she's just a gorgeous blonde, bombshell of an anchor for the Blaze and where she was at One American News Network. And that's going to work in her favor automatically. That's going to be the hook. And then the draw and the drive is going to be her message that she delivers home with it. But in this case, I have great respect for what she does. And I have great hopes for her in the future on what she's actually going to end up doing, because I think that she is going to level off in her rhetoric and actually become a great resource of information, hopefully to continue to be that presence at the Blaze and continue there. My biggest fear is that, you know, what I kept on talking about over the course of this whole election is that Trump actually, his biggest goal was to start up his own Trump network for a television network. My biggest fear would be that she would actually be a person that moved over there. And to that point too, one of the things that Trevor Noah labeled her as was either, I think it was like the princess or queen of the alt-right, which we actually mentioned Milo Yiannopoulos earlier too. He is considered one of the faces of the alt-right. And I take issue with that, because Tomi actually came out as a supporter of Marco Rubio originally and really pounded home him as a candidate until he saw the way that the election was swaying. And once it started to go in favor of Trump and Hillary Clinton as the candidates, she had to make the choice. And it was a choice that I eventually made as a never Trumper too. It's either going to be him or Hillary, and we know what we're getting with Hillary. We're taking a chance with Trump. Let's take that chance. Let's take that gamble instead of going down a road to hell under a Hillary Clinton presidency. So, and actually, you know, I think Milo Yiannopoulos, I think he would actually be the one that would prefer to be considered the queen or princess of the alt-right. I think he would get a kick out of that, because he's the first one to joke about that kind of stuff. So, we talked about how the interview was narrowed down from 26 to 6 minutes of highlights. Let's see. Oh, okay. So here's what's been getting under my skin lately. I post this interview as an example of just tired rhetoric, because this interview showed a couple things in my mind. Okay. What it showed is that the narrative of the left continues to be, even in the wake of the election results, that conservatives should be pigeonholed as not only racist, but bigots, homophobes, sexists, and misogynists. Okay? The reason why the election turned out the numbers that it did and put these people into power is because those narratives have gotten old and stale. They no longer work for a couple of reasons. The liberals that get into these arguments where they actually shout these things at you sound like a broken record. They have no debate skills. They have no ways of intellectually conversing with you on what the issues are and making their point and driving it home with facts. They rely on emotion. On the other hand, the people that are receiving these comments, like myself in some cases, and I've had to deal with this from personal friends that know me, for crying out loud, is it's gotten so common that it rolls off your back like water on a duck. I mean, it's just, okay, yeah, I get it. I'm a bigot, I'm a homophobe, I'm a racist, and you want me to go down the road of saying I have friends that are this and that. I mean, it's gotten so tired. It's like you just look right past them into their eyes and you see that there's an emptiness behind it, because there's an emptiness in the skull, for the matter. If that's their biggest argument and what they're going with, you know, let them go. Just walk away from them, because they show no intellectual capacity to have a debate. They lack the equipment for it. So in this case, with this interview, that's what kind of got me posting this interview. Is I think it was a scripted attack that went along these lines that it's just grown tired. And we talked about how Nancy Pelosi being reelected as the minority leader is a sign that the left just doesn't understand they need to change their tactics and their policies and go with this change in the country's attitude. At the same time, in the media, we're seeing that places and media outlets like The Daily Show are showing that they're not getting what's going on out here in the country with the people, because they continue with the same types of attacks. Okay? Now, the other side of this story too, which isn't being talked about out there too much by too many people, is that there is a time, and the time is now, to start having these conversations with the other side, where we actually say, okay, we've spent enough time attacking each other. This was one of the ugliest, nastiest elections. And I would actually argue that we as the American voters were nastier towards each other and our opposing opposition in voters than the candidates were with each other or with other people that the stories made the news for the way Trump labeled people. We have actually gotten into fights with friends and family members and just devolved into this mud throwing and this nastiness towards each other. And instead, what I think the American public now is trying to turn to on both sides of the aisle, the best people on both sides of the aisle, and I pray that you are that type of person on my side, and I pray that if anybody ever watches this video that's on the left-hand side, they would feel the same way, is it's time to stop with the name-calling and the mudslinging and actually sit down with the opposing side and say, here's what I believe, here's why I feel this way, and this is what I want done. How do you feel? What do you want to do? And how do we approach yours? Here's what's interesting. I don't watch Fox News. I get accused of that all the time. You know, I don't have cable, so I don't get my news from TV at all. But when I did have TV, what I would do is I would watch the news sources from the left and the right, because at some point, if they're covering the same topic, there's an overlap of that. And where that overlaps is where you're going to find the facts, okay? To the left and to the right of that, you're going to find opinions and commentary on what those facts are. But the facts are what is important. If there's one thing that's important for us to go forward on and to argue on, is that the most important aspect is truth. We need to tackle truth. And that was one of the topics of the last podcast, is with these faux hate crimes perpetrated in the name of Donald Trump and his supporters that are happening around the country right now. You know, where, just as a quick example, this woman on a college campus had her hijab stolen off of her, and obscenities were yelled at her by two white male Trump supporters, and it turned out that this was a fake incident. And like I said, the danger in reporting fake incidents like this is now you have some pissed off liberal people that want to defend this woman, searching that area that happened to be in that area for two white males that fit this description that could either beat the hell out of the person or kill him. Okay? Now, if these actions happen based on a lie, and we as a society put these posts up, these lying posts onto Facebook, and don't follow it up with, okay, I'm sorry that I posted this, here's the truth, what actually happened is this was a fabricated story, then we are not living in the truth. And that's a bad place to be, because in that case, you are deciding whether your agenda is more important than the truth, or the truth is more important than your agenda. Okay? Right off the bat, within the first couple topics that I covered tonight, I attacked Trump on his tweet that attacked people that are burning the flag. If we don't hold our own sides more accountable than the opposing side, then we run the very great risk of looking like hypocrites. Okay? If we say that Obama's doing this wrong, he's using executive orders wrong, and then suddenly Trump gets into office and he starts pushing things through with executive orders, and we're all la-di-da and dandy with that, then we're going to have some real issues, because we're going to be called out as hypocrites on the right, that we're allowing Trump to get away with things that Obama got away with when we were attacking him. And that's not right. We need to stand on morals and principles, no matter which side you're on, and hold your party more accountable. And the most important thing to do that on is founded in the truth of what's actually happening. That's my take on that. That's one of my thoughts. So give me a second. I'm just going to take a drink here. Okay. By the way, we had some streaming issues on the past two podcasts, and what I tried doing was streaming it through YouTube and then through Facebook. What I'm doing from now on is I'm just going to run with this Facebook live feed here, where you can tune in there. You're not actually picking up my microphone on here. This microphone is actually going to be attached to my camera sitting over there, which is a high definition one, and you're going to get a picture of the whole set, and I will be posting that on YouTube as soon as possible, and you can watch the whole set then if you're not tuning into the live version. So let's go on to the next one here. So an article, I believe it came out today. It came out in regards to Oregon schools banning Santa from the classroom because he's too religious. Now, you can argue with me all you want on this topic as far as, our intentions as a family. But the reason I laugh so hard at this article is because my wife and I don't do Santa in our house. Okay. Trust me. First of all, if you don't have kids yet and you're planning on having kids and you don't want to do Santa, prepare for all out war with your in-laws and your own parents, because the second you break the news to them that they're not going to be able to give gifts to their grandchildren from Santa, it's all over. You just lit a fuse there. But the reason why we don't do Santa is because he has become a commercial symbol, or a symbol of commercialism, that takes the focus off of Christ in Christmas, and we think it's a detriment. So the fact that Oregon schools are saying that Santa is a symbol of religion, I just find absolutely hilarious. They're obviously not thinking this through. I mean, Santa basically started, wasn't it with Coca-Cola or something? I mean, that push really started going. I mean, you have Kris Kringle or whatever, and that old tradition and everything. But the modern image of Santa that we see today is the Coca-Cola image of Santa. So I find that hilarious and absurd that we've gotten to this point where, it's just an all-out assault with flanking in all directions on our holidays in the schools. Because if you don't know this too, we are actually not teaching. Hey, Anthony, thanks for joining in there, man. Yeah, absolutely. They must be liberals. Well, that's the whole West Coast. I mean, so, I love it. I love getting involved there. That's good. So what we have though is, where was I going? Oh, if you don't know this already, what we also have is an attack on Thanksgiving. And one of the articles that has been floating around and really taking root is that Thanksgiving is under attack because schools and liberals in specifically in the school districts believe that the Pilgrims were the first terrorists in the United States. So there's actually been articles out there where people go into schools to have parent-teacher conferences, and they start walking down the schools in the fall time, and they see these arts and crafts and everything of Indians all along the hallways. And when they get in the classroom, they say, "Oh, it's really great that you're going over Native American history and what happened with Thanksgiving and everything. When are you going to get to the Pilgrims? Because we don't see any Pilgrims." And the teachers say to them, "Well, we don't believe in going over the Pilgrims because they're America's first terrorists." This is the kind of stuff that we're getting to in what's happening in our schools. One of the many reasons why I have pulled our children out of the public school system, among many. So now not only do we have Thanksgiving being attacked, but we have Christmas being attacked because Santa is a religious symbol, which is an absolute load. Actually, Santa's sack full of crap for liberals. Okay. Now, if you didn't know this as well, one of the big articles last week was that California has been discussing seceding because of the Trump election. He hasn't even taken office yet, and he's doing great things. So not only was California considering that, but also Oregon as well. So Oregon, where this is happening, is considering that as well. So if we just take Oregon, Washington, and California and split them off and have them secede into their own liberal utopia society on the left-hand side, have at it. They have the San Andreas Fault out there, and they can deal with the earthquakes and high taxes. As far as I'm concerned, go for it. I don't really care. That's fine. And as and that's another thing I actually pointed out last week too, is that we have, since Texas came into formation in the early 1800s, they had been talking about seceding from the United States to be their own republic. And they get made fun of constantly for this. They're made fun of and they're ridiculed and everything. But the second that California wants to do it because Trump wins, it's all okay. So whatever. So here's something else that came out. Oh, this one's good. A longtime friend of Hillary Clinton says that Hillary is done with politics. That's great. Hallelujah for that. So hallelujah, sing hallelujah. It's the time of the season. You can say it for that, and you can say it for the fact that she's not going to be running again. Now, of course, the other articles that are coming out are also saying that they're grooming Chelsea Clinton to start running for something. Whatever. You know, I think people see right through that. Everybody is just absolutely, the fact that Jeb Bush was running in this election in the primaries. You know, he was supposed to be the shoo-in for the candidates, you know? And the fact that don't believe what for a minute, Matt? Let me know what you don't believe. Oh, that Chelsea is being groomed? You let me know. That is what's being said. And of course, I think that's through political people that they're actually dealing with, that I heard that through. But where was I? Oh, the Bushes, right? So Jeb was running. He was supposed to be a shoo-in as the Republican candidate in the primary. Oh, I don't believe it either. Okay, so Matt, my buddy Matt here says that he doesn't believe for a second that Hillary is quitting. I'm right there with you. But Matt, here's something I want to actually point out in regards to this. The fact that she lost to Obama. Okay, now that was a historic election on the left, right? I mean, let's be very honest for a second here. The left was going to make history no matter what. Either they were going to have the first black president or the first female president. What the left chose to do at the time in 2008 was go with their first black president. Okay, so it was to be her time. The DNC was grooming her, and we know this through emails that have come out through the DNC that were hacked, that the DNC was colluding with Hillary Clinton's campaign to make sure that she was the winner, that Bernie Sanders was pushed out, even though he was the more popular candidate amongst the left, right? So the fact that she was beaten by Obama and just like total whirlwind and knocked out on that one, then to lose to Donald Trump. Now, again, I'm not a big fan of Donald Trump, but you just got beat by a celebrity running for office that had one of the highest unpopular ratings ever. So I agree with you. I think that she's not going to take herself out of politics, but I think it would be detrimental to her and her health, which is already tipsy-turvy as it is, if she would actually try running again, because I believe that unless Trump is just the worst president ever and can give her that slide into office, she will be beaten again, because the left is going to want to put up someone like, I believe, Elizabeth Warren, okay, to have that first female president, which is better than Hillary. I disagree with Elizabeth Warren's policies and the fact that, you know, she has done things up at Harvard or wherever she teaches at that are hypocritical to what she says. But she got beat by Obama. She got beat by Trump. I mean, this is just embarrassing at this point. Pull yourself out of politics. It's done for her. I actually do believe that she's done. She may get involved in some other political avenues, but I don't think she's ever going to run for office again, especially if a longtime friend is saying this now. So let's keep with the news on the left and who's in office or who came out of office and everything. In this case, we actually have an article that came out that a former Nobel Committee secretary regrets awarding the Peace Prize to Obama. Okay, now if you remember, he was awarded the Peace Prize between the 2008 election results and him assuming office. So he had. They were, first of all, not only did he get the Nobel Peace Prize, they were naming elementary schools and things after him, like the Barack Obama Elementary School and stuff like that. I mean, they were just making these monuments to him as a historical figure before he even assumed office and started doing things. So are we really surprised that they regret giving him this award before he even took office? I mean, it was ridiculous for them to do it in the first place. The right, including myself, went absolutely ape crap when they gave him this award, because there was nothing to base it on. And what have we seen since then? We've seen him continue the Operation Wide Receiver under Bush, which was the gun running to Mexico, in the form of Operation Fast and Furious, which actually didn't have the same tracking mechanisms in place for the firearms to track those weapons coming back across the border, to see where that cycle went so they can actually track down the cartel groups and everything. He continued this policy, and in my mind, what I believe is the only reason why he did that is to cause gun violence across our border in our states and cities, to push a gun control agenda. There was no other reason why you wouldn't be tracking those firearms. As a matter of fact, it was like a sniper rifle or something, showed up in El Chapo's compound as one of the guns that came from Fast and Furious. So this is the kind of person that the Nobel Peace Prize is going to. Not only that, you have what happened in Benghazi. It is very clear right now, based on the accounts of the survivors of Benghazi, God bless them, the Navy SEALs that were there, or ex-Navy SEALs, that the reason why we were there in the first place was to run firearms and equipment to Syrian rebels to overthrow Assad. Okay? Now, for the left that's so anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment, to prop up this guy that they believe deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, when he goes around and in other countries starts running guns in different directions, is one of the most hypocritical things you can actually imagine. I mean, at what point is the left going to acknowledge that they made a huge mistake and that he isn't the saint? First of all, you'd have to have the media actually cover these things, but they don't. So not only that, let's talk about the peace times here in the United States and the fact that he stuck his nose in local matters and riled up racial tension and drove a further wedge into this country based on these things. Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown. You have the Harvard professor up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, I guess, where he got drunk and went to his own house and was stumbling around and broke into his own house to get in, and the cops were called on because it was dark out and no one knew who he was. The cops show up and arrest him because he doesn't have his identification on him, and the first thing that Obama says, without knowing any facts, is that the cops acted stupidly. He immediately has set the public in this course of action against the police officers and made this an issue where it's the cops versus the rest of us, especially us as the minorities, that it's this tension, right? And it's been case upon case. The hands up, don't shoot has been disproven as well. And that's something that Tomi actually pointed out as well. You know, this narrative that's out there. So, but what Obama has done is taken these instances where it's local issues and then magnifies them into national issues before the facts are even revealed, and blows us all up and sets a divide in this country that I haven't experienced in my lifetime. Now, let me tackle this right now. Matt, who's commenting on my post right now, my Facebook Live, is a dear friend of mine. I hope he didn't do the mad face there, from high school, who I said recently, we were discussing racial issues, and I said, you know, I'm actually surprised to hear some people say that in our school district that there was racial tension. And he let me in on some things that were happening behind my back that I either failed to recognize or didn't realize were happening, that I said I would have stood up for him and others in our school district had I known about it. I would have gladly done it and set myself against the grain with those types of people. I didn't notice them, and maybe that's my fault, but I have not seen a divide like we're witnessing lately in all of my lifetime. Okay. Things are supposed to be getting better, and for the most part I believe that the chance is there for things to be even better. But the more we focus on these crimes and label them as hate crimes before we even have all the facts. One thing that was actually really interesting was I heard either in an article or an interview today that a police officer said that in regards to this one guy, I guess the case was that he went up to, okay, it was an NFL player, and some can actually, on the stream, can probably provide me with more details because I wasn't paying close attention. But what actually happened was a guy walked up to a car, fired 3 times at this guy who is an NFL player, a black NFL player, and killing him, I guess. And this guy was questioned at the scene and then released. And people are really pissed off that he was released. But this officer said, you have to understand that this is for the best, because if we don't tackle things by our procedures and cross all of our T's and dot all of our I's, and they eventually brought him back in and arrested him, if we don't do it the proper way, then when this type of thing goes to court, they can get us for technicalities on different things. Okay, ex-player Joe McKnight, former USC Trojan. Thank you, Matt. So this is the guy that was killed. If we don't cross our T's, dot all our I's, technicalities in a court case, by not doing it right by the procedure, could get this guy let go. Okay? So I think it's important to focus on those types of things, and that's the reason why it is so important that someone in the position of power like Obama's in doesn't stick his nose into local issues and stirring up public fury over these issues, trying to sway the decision of what's going on. Because if we get it wrong, either the bad guy walks free or the wrong person is put into jail. So I found that pretty interesting. And thank you, Matt, for pointing out the player's name, Joe McKnight. So that's unfortunate because his dad said that he was living his dream and had his whole future ahead of him. Obviously, he did. I don't know what the incident was over. I don't know why he was shot. I don't know why this guy shot him. I don't know if he was a random person or even a cop. But the fact is, a life was ended there. All right, so I did have another topic that I wanted to write down, but I didn't. So this is actually going to be our last topic here. So Buzzfeed keeps on making all my articles here. Buzzfeed has attacked Chip and Joanna Gaines for going to church, a church that supports traditional marriage and not gay marriage. Oh, I'll go back real quick. Matt, he said that the NFL player was 28 years old. So anyway, Buzzfeed is attacking Chip and Joanna Gaines for going to church, a church that supports traditional marriage. Now, Chip and Joanna on their HGTV show don't go into the topic of marriage because they don't need to discuss it. The only way that this would be an issue is if they had a same-sex couple on their show that was looking for a house and they somehow brought it up that they can't do this for those people and made an issue of it. So the fact that BuzzFeed or this writer at BuzzFeed or editor is going after the Gaines on this, the only thing that you can logically conclude from this activity in this article is that they attack them because of their beliefs and that they want to get this couple fired because they have a different belief system. So what this amounts to, I think, if you look at this with a clear head, is that this is a witch hunt. It's a modern witch hunt to find people that you disagree with and make a public issue of it to shame them and draw them out and get them fired and make sure that they never hit public spotlight again. Here's what's interesting about this article. A gay man, Brandon Ambrosino, wrote in, I believe it was the Washington Post, either today or yesterday, that, and by the way, he's about to marry his partner, argued against the BuzzFeed article, saying some journalists, specifically younger ones at popular digital publications, will tell stories in a certain deceitful, manipulative way to take down conservatives. And really, I can't for the life of me imagine any other intention of the Gaines story. So exactly what I just said. Now, this is a man who's marrying his partner, same-sex marriage, defending the Gaines against BuzzFeed because he also realizes that this is a witch hunt and that shouldn't be happening. It's hypocrisy. So This is what we're dealing with right now in America. So we covered a lot of topics tonight. Like I said at the beginning of this, I go back through all the things I posted. I pick out the most popular things as well as what I thought were the most interesting. And I try to cover those in the podcast and go a little bit deeper into my own commentary, because I don't share as much as my commentary as possible on the post, because those posts would be super long and no one would read them. So this video on Facebook, the Facebook Live, will be posted, and you can watch it again from the beginning if you didn't catch it. The full video, which you can catch with the full set behind me, will be posted on YouTube within the next 24 hours. So you can lead people to that if you want to go over topics of discussion. I appreciate Matt and Anthony getting involved on the Facebook Live. I hope we continue to do that in the future and get more people involved. Remember to like and share this video with friends and family so we can get them involved. Lead them to the Facebook page. Lead them to the YouTube channel, which is, if you look up Generation Y Conservative on YouTube, that's where you're going to find the full video and the full set. There you'll find all my podcasts as well as some other videos that I've done in the past where I go over specific topics, and it's fun, you know. Also, for those of you that don't know, we are working on getting a show launched on a local broadcasting network here, cable network, sorry. And once that is done, it should be about February. I'm looking for advertisers right now for that. Those full episodes, because I retain full ownership of them, will be showing up on YouTube, and I will post them there as well if you don't happen to be in our local area and are interested in watching them at any point in time. They'll actually air about 8 times a month. And at first it'll be one show that's aired 8 times, and then depending on the popularity of that, we'll see where it goes, is what I was being told. So I appreciate everybody tuning in. Again, you can find me on my Facebook page, The Generation Y Conservative on the YouTube channel, Twitter at Gen Y Conservative without the E on the end. I thank you very much. Have a great night. I appreciate you tuning in, and join me next time and get involved. Have a good one.